inflation inflicted on poorer countries have made them too vulnerable to find the resources they need to finance their way to net zero. While the global north borrows money for lower interest rates and burdens the global south with higher interest rates, how are the destabilized nations that suffer from the consequences of climate change, which stems from the global north's history of colonization and imperialism, expected to reach a climate solution? Leaders feigned concern about the climate crisis and sold their plans to secure a better future. While people are starving, floods are killing thousands, and the heat is torrid. So what about now? The United States is one of the wealthy nations that advocates resolving the climate crisis, despite the fact that one of the main causes of the existing crisis is its global imperialist and colonialist agenda, which is best explained through climate imperialism and colonialism. How? I'm going to break it down for you. Now, before we start digging, what is climate imperialism? When developed and industrialized nations live at the expense of less developed nations' ecosystems, this is known as climate imperialism, commonly known as climate colonialism. In other words, wealthy nations who produce the majority of the world's carbon emissions look upon developing nations to make up the difference. By adopting an imperialist mindset and using the climate problem as their pretext, they are yet again exploiting poorer countries. For instance, the US, which makes up 4 to 5% of the world population, nonetheless consumes 25% of the world's resources. It outsources production to China and then criticizes it for being a carbon polluter. So, how is the US agenda one of the leading factors for the global climate crisis? The US created an empire that reaches across the globe using approximately 800 military bases in 80 countries to protect its interests at the expense of the poorer nations, in order to feed its excessive capitalist drive to produce and acquire goods. This is a model of military imperialism's effect on climate crisis. At a time when it should be doing the exact opposite, US imperialist operations safeguard and fund the future of oil. It also destabilizes countries, making them more susceptible to natural disasters that the climate crisis has made worse. For example, Iraq is one of the nations that has been experiencing this firsthand. After years of US occupation in Iraq, the landscapes are damaged. In the 1990s, wetlands along the Tigris and Euphrates were purposely drained to harm communities that depended on their ecosystems. 90% of Iraq's marshlands had vanished by 2001. The rising temperatures in the nation triggered dust storms and less fertile land. Due to the heat, Iraqi farmers who had long cared for the land were suddenly compelled to pursue alternative sources of income. For those on the front lines, the US has ruthlessly set the region ablaze to save its oil interests. While the US continues to release carbon dioxide into the air, overheating the planet, it is also robbing countries on the front lines of climate instability of their ability to respond to disasters and then turning a blind eye. The United States has the second largest fleet of coal factories and is the largest producer and consumer of natural gas and oil, which are the primary cause of the climate crisis. The middle-class bourgeois Western slogan, "We are worried about the future," should be replaced with a slogan that advocates for change today. Some participating states have formally refused to sign at climate conferences because the US and EU countries were not ready to own up to their climate debt. They dare give lectures after exploiting nations, annihilating and colonizing the indigenous, yet call the West a garden and the rest of the world a jungle. They overexploit nations and then lecture them to reduce consumption. The root of climate change is climate imperialism, which stems from the global North's greed for the world's resources. To truly face the climate crisis, we must forge an anti-imperialist agenda, and the US, like other rich nations, must take responsibility.